What's up, you guys? Happy Valentine's Day. Oh, come here, Teddy. Teddy wants to say Happy Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. um, I am going to talk all about love today and healthy love, which is a route that took me a long time to both understand, figure out how to give, and be okay to receive. So I hope that if you're watching this today, are having a happy Valentine's Day, but if it's showing up differently, that you found some way to show yourself love, because at the end of the day, that's what it is all about, is making sure that you are a priority in your own life. If you don't know me, I am on a adventure of creating daily videos for the next 100 days. Today is day 11. And my name is Brianna. I am first and foremost a 20 plus year licensed clinical psychotherapist, but I am way more than that. I'm a multifaceted mentor who coaches 6 and 7 figure business owners, CEOs, and entrepreneurs to match the success of their professional life with their personal life, match their personal life to their professional life. I'm a speaker, and I am also an author, and I'm a dog advocate. I love dogs. I've fostered like 25 dogs. And I'm also a tween who's growing pimples again. So today you're going to see a very raw version of me, because I would have hid this other ways. But, here I am. Part of my reason for continuing to make these videos is to expose myself in order to learn more about myself, but also find a new level of confidence in who I am, how I speak, and my story and my message. So, healthy love does not require you to shrink. I had to learn that in a very long, roundabout way. But healthy love does not require you to shrink. I, for most of my life, when it came to dating, learned that if I adjusted myself enough, I would get what I want, which was more attention, for them to stay with me, for them to come back. And so in my need to adjust, I started to really lose myself. I started to disappear from the forefront of these relationships. Um, and as I lost a piece of myself in each relationship, it wasn't because of what they were doing. It was because of who I thought I had to be in order to experience love. Now, I don't even know how to put this into words, because it probably deserves its own video, but I was consistently choosing emotionally unavailable men or emotionally volatile men who had no control or self-awareness about their emotions. And so, in being in relationships like that, I had to put my emotions aside in order to create this balance, um, which is not healthy. So, I want to share a little bit about my pattern, my dating pattern. And it's funny because most of the men that I dated were white, tattooed, very like what do they call that? Like blue collar type of men. And that became an attraction. Beards, tattoos, whatever. Um, my I'm going to speak to just after divorce, okay? Because after divorce, something happened. And I was just looking for somebody to love me again. I was looking for somebody to love me for who I am. But what I realized was I was picking these men, again, who were emotionally unavailable. And so if they weren't going to love me for who I am, then I'm going to be who I need to be in order to get their love, because I can't risk losing somebody else, right? Um, I'm saying all this after years of therapy and self-awareness and working on myself and identifying these very underlying gaps in my self-esteem issues versus my choices. But what shifted for me as I was starting to look at these patterns was I was picking people based on preference. And that preference was a consistent choice in the type of men I was dating. And so these men that were telling me I'm too emotional, that am too much, that I need to tone myself down, that I'm asking too much, that in my brain said, well, I just need to change the way I am, and then they'll be okay with that, right? Then I'll get their attention, then they'll want to stay longer, which of course didn't happen. And so in this act of abandoning myself, um, I was abandoning my deeper needs and desires when it came to the type of relationship that I ultimately wanted. Um, and so the truth is, I was not honest in my relationships, not because I was being deceptive, but because I never felt safe. And so my dishonesty led me into rooms with these men that I really truthfully never belonged in the first place, because I was being disingenuous. Um, I remember like these times in these relationships with these men post divorce where I was emotionally manipulating situations to work for me, meaning I was pretending like I was fine when in fact I was sad, I was disappointed, I was confused, but I couldn't say any of that because they weren't emotionally available enough for me to express those things. And then I was made wrong if I did, and then I would feel ashamed, and then I would shut down and do whatever I needed to do to get them back to be back in their good graces, right? Like this cycle. I'm not the only one that lives in this cycle, lived, because I don't live there now, but I'm not the only one that lived in this cycle. And I see this in a lot of the women that I do therapy with, because it is the easiest way to get what you want, which is to not be alone and to experience love, even if it's heartbroken, dangerously um, unsafe, um, manipulative type of love. It was love, right? And when you're hungry for something enough, you're going to eat whatever is put in front of you. So I would then stew in these situations that were happening because of the anxious parts of myself for days and days, because I didn't trust that my emotions were welcomed into the picture. And so I would go up here into my head and try to create all of these fantasy scenarios and interactions where I could express myself or where I could hold back so that I could then get the needs met that I had, as unhealthy as they were. Um, all this did was build resentment inside of me and resentment in the men that I was dating. And this is how that like silent anxiety just grows and grows and grows and grows. So um, when my marriage ended, we were never going to last. We did not communicate well. Um, and unless both of us worked on that, it was never going to improve, right? And so the next person I chose after that had all of the things that I wanted in somebody who wanted to talk to me, who had a lot of the same interests as me, and we could have fun together. But what I didn't look at is like how he actually communicated, how he handled conflict, how he made me feel. And so I push all those aside. Then the second guy, he gave me the love that I desired, always wanted to be with me, always wanted to talk to me, but yet he was not healthy or healed in a lot of ways. And so again, it made me feel there was a level of discomfort that it wasn't meeting my need inside. And then the next one after that, again, my pattern after divorce was I would get these guys that were like wanting to talk and wanting to hang out, but then all of a sudden something shifted and they weren't meeting a need that I had. They weren't being consistent. And there's something inside of me saying something is wrong, but the anxious part of me would say, no, it must be me, right? And so I kept ignoring this intuitive experience that I was having. And so by ignoring this, I hurt myself in the process of, again, losing myself and forcing these relationships to happen, when in fact, all I needed was to literally pull myself out of this narrow viewpoint and see things from a broader perspective that what was happening was not meant for me, and I can never ever force what's meant for me to happen. So you have to remember that as you are in the dating process, or maybe you've ended up marrying somebody that you now know does not fit well with you based on your own growth, like who you choose in a brokenhearted place is only going to be able to match your broken heart. They can never give you more because you are not available enough to receive that. And if they give you less, the brokenhearted part of yourself is going to continue to chase that to try and fill it instead of recognizing, oh, wow, this isn't healthy for me and I'm not healthy. So I should step away and just be on my own. So I realized through this dating process that I was choosing emotionally unavailable men. I was trying to prove my worth to all of them. I was um, confused when intimacy was added in because it showed me one thing but had me feeling another. And I believed that love required me to perform and be somebody that I'm not. And so, as you are going through this process, if you are someone who's constantly having to prove your value, you are not in alignment. You are not in alignment with yourself. You are not in alignment with who God created you to be and who He believes you to be. And you're not in alignment with what you deserve. You're living in survival. And so I, post divorce, was living in this survival mechanism of just wanting someone to love me, just wanting somebody to choose me, and then picking people who weren't loving me or choosing me. Like, it's crazy how when the thing that we want most when we're in a brokenhearted place is the thing that we ultimately never get in the situation. And so I had to start doing things differently. Again, yes, I went to therapy. Microdosing was a big part of that. Um, I was in my own healing journey. My faith became a bigger part of that in the last several years, but I had to start doing things differently. I could not choose from loneliness any longer. I could not choose from fear. I could not choose from a desperated place of needing to be loved by somebody else. I could not choose from a place of validation. I could not choose from making sure that they were aesthetically the way that I always dated, and that's it. I had to narrow in my values. I had to broaden my idea of what a good partner physically looks like and what a good partner actively looks like as they are showing me who they are and what they bring to the table. Um, I created this 6-step framework for dating, especially post divorce, as a Christian person, because I firsthand had to look at developing a new rubric for myself that aligned with the partnership that I was meant to be in. And what happens, I think, whether it's divorce or a really big breakup or lots of tiny breakups, is we go into choosing people based on what we don't want to experience anymore. And it can mess you up, because what you're doing is you're choosing from a place of survival so that you don't experience the same thing. You're not picking what you want, you're picking what you don't want to experience again. Does that make sense? Like, you're choosing from a negative place already. So why would you ever choose another positive relationship, right? So I had to put these boundaries on the way that I started making decisions in my dating process. Um, at first, I was dating on the apps for a little bit, but what I found the most challenging there was that a high majority, not all, but a high majority of men were looking for their own sense of validation and looking for entertainment, and weren't as serious as they said they were. And so, what I started to do was calculate my risk of time on the apps. And so I did go on there. I had my profile on there, but I wasn't invested to being on there constantly. And I was always looking at behaviors. I didn't care what they said, it was what they were doing. and I didn't give a lot of my time to places that weren't paying me for the time that I was given. Um, I shared the story of how I met my husband with you in an earlier video. Lucky for me, I met my husband in the back row of an auditorium at my church. That was our first interaction. And so I already knew that this person was more in alignment than any of the other men I was choosing. Like, how crazy is it that I had this list of things that I said I wanted in a man? One being like a Christian and active in their faith. And then I would date guys and I would ask them where they were at in their faith. And they say, well, I believe in God, but like, I don't read my Bible and I don't do this and I don't do that. And I'd be like, oh, okay. Well, he said part of it, so it's fine. That I would pick somebody who was like active and healthy and mirrored the same lifestyle that I had with my health. And then I would date these dudes who were active and healthy, but also smoked weed and drank a lot, both of which I don't do. So, like, Brianna, like, what were you doing? It was like I was constantly negating what I wanted because they would give me a piece of what I wanted. And in my head, that was enough because, again, I was just so hungry to be loved. And so, putting boundaries on how you use your time in the dating process is important. Another boundary that I created was a boundary around my autonomy. I didn't overshare anymore. I didn't share a lot. I didn't merge things too quickly. I set boundaries on the amount of things that we texted back and forth versus talked on the phone. I set boundaries around how long we would be talking before, if they weren't going to ask me to see, like, go on a date, like, what are we doing? And then the biggest piece was I set a boundary around making sure that I was still valuing and putting priority on my personal time and my time with my friends. Because let's be honest, once we start dating, we lose track of the importance of those two things and how they carried us through our single season anyway. I also stopped stewing. And this was a huge growth area for me because I stopped rehearsing all of these potential things that could happen based on interactions, whether that was like predicting this relationship going the distance or predicting conversations in my head. And I learned how to manage the dysregulation in my nervous system so that I could have real conversations and listen intently to hear what they were saying and then watch just as intently to see if the behaviors match that. There was a time where I had been dating somebody and I told him that I did not want to have sex until marriage. And then he kept pressuring and pressuring, and then I gave in. That should have been the sign right there. And yet I still wanted to stick it out with this guy. We have to stop believing that we're being rigid in what we want and acknowledge that there's a level of rigidity we have to have when it comes to our morals and our values and our beliefs, that if there is any part of that that doesn't fit, the relationship is not going to be what you ultimately want it to be. Now, okay, they have to have a six-pack and blonde hair and blue eyes and at least 6'4" and do this and do that or whatever it is. Like, you're being extra, okay? I'm telling you, you're being extra because my husband looks nothing like the men that I dated prior in multiple different ways, but he is the most kind and generous and consistent and thoughtful and loving and honest man that I have ever been with through my dating journey and my previous marriage. There's not one thing about him that I would want to change because, like, physically, because he's giving me all of the things that I had never experienced before. So I encourage you, just like I did with myself, I had to step into the dating process with a new set of eyes and a new set of expectations. Because you choosing from a place of preference is going to make it a challenge, or it might set you up to fail, because let's be honest, God's already got somebody for you. And who you think it is and who he says it is are going to be completely different. Okay. Okay. Um, I in going back to the speaking things honestly in real time, that was a huge challenge for me for a very long time. And so this growth area, I feel so proud of myself in, because I had to say it right away. I had to say it calmly. I had to say it honestly. And I had to say it without trying to make a point, but just because it needed to be said. Communicating to express instead of trying to convince, which is what I was doing before. Holy cow. When you can get to a place in a relationship where you can communicate to express and not convince, you have made it. Because when I'm having to convince somebody to love me, convince somebody to want to spend time with me, convince somebody to want to pay attention to me, convince somebody to want to get me, I've already lost. So I I want to I want to remind you that you don't have to earn love, and healthy love exists. You can feel safe in love, meaning that you're not having butterflies in your stomach of anxiety. Your mind's not ruminating on all the things that could be happening. You don't get triggered by having to turn on this like false sense of self and audition and be somebody you're not. You don't have to give up any part of yourself. Healthy love is you being yourself and being fully accepted and seen for that person. Healthy love does not punish you emotionally. It invites you to be as emotional as you need to be. And healthy love does not make you guess your value in the room. It doesn't make you give up what you value. It embraces it and brings it closer together. And then there's this beautiful blending that happens with somebody else when they truly know how to love. So if you are feeling more anxious than peaceful, that is not like what happens. The biggest thing that I see, and I saw it in myself, is women confuse this idea of passion and attraction for like compatibility. And passion and attraction can also be an anxious experience because your intuition is saying there's something about this that is not going to be peaceful for you. Your nervous system is on high alert. That is what's sounding in you. So when you feel like, oh my gosh, there's just so much passion here, there's just so much attraction, take a beat, sis. Take a beat and slow down, because there's something that you may need to listen to in your nervous system. What I can say about meeting my husband was I have never felt more like systemically calm and like flatlined, not dead, but like a flatline feeling. And that's because I was choosing somebody from a healed place. I was choosing somebody that had also healed. I was choosing from a place of having my life put together and established in a way where I loved being by myself and I loved being with my friends, and I was never resentful of being alone or hating it. And choosing somebody who was aligned in values and morals and beliefs. So I want to encourage you in this season of love, wherever you're at in your relationship. Again, whether you're already in one watching this and thinking like, yeah, right, like now I'm stuck, or yeah, I have this, or I've never had this and I don't think it's possible, or I don't even know where to start. Believe me, take these steps that I took and start putting them into play in some micro step of a way. And I promise you, you're going to see a shift and feel a shift in how you experience your dating process and how you experience your relationships. Um, Even just today in a couples therapy session that I had, we were talking about how they're each individually afraid to be fully expressive and honest about things because they don't want to trigger the other person. That's not going to work. because then you become resentful and you hide who you are in the relationship and what you need. So if you can practice even seeing, for me, one of the biggest things was recognizing if I'm really telling you that I love you, then that means I'm going to be honest with you, even if it's hard and even if it hurts you. And if you can't receive that, then you don't know what love is and you don't know how to receive it, and you're making it mean something about you it's not. And vice versa. I have to believe that when someone comes to me, when my husband comes to me with honesty, that he's doing it because he loves me, not because he wants to hurt me. Now, obviously, in all of these things, if you are being abused, if you are being disrespected, if you are, you know, being hurt in some way, get the heck out, girlfriend. You do not need to be in that. Message me. I will come pick you up. Okay, because you do not deserve that. But what I do know is we all deserve healthy love. And the moment I experienced it for the first time was the moment that I finally got to roll my shoulders back and start breathing, because I didn't have to worry anymore about all of those. Think about how much energy and time you have to put into the consumption of ruminating, being somebody else, and doing what you think needs to be done instead of just being yourself and letting everything else fall into place. Like, insane, insane. So, dating as an anxious person, I think, has its challenges, but what I can tell you is taking a test on whether or not I have an anxious attachment or secure attachment 4 years ago, anxious avoidant. 2 months ago, secure, because I've done the work and I've followed these steps. So, yeah, I know that healthy love exists, and if it exists for me after everything that I've gone through, I know it exists for you. So I want you to remember that. I hope you have a great day. Say bye, Teddy. Happy Valentine's Day.